So today I'm talking about a subject that I've never done a video on before. It's a subject that I honestly don't even want to talk about, but when I sat down to write my latest devotional, I had a strong inclination to talk about anxiety. And I imagine many of us have Phillippians 4 and 6 memorized. Be anxious for nothing but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. Let your requests be made known to God. But just exactly how are you supposed to do that, really? How are you supposed to simply tell yourself not to be anxious when life is uncertain? Some might even say crazy. If you have ever found yourself asking this question, or you find yourself in an uncertain situation right now, join me on my YouTube channel where I'll be talking about my latest devotional, Dealing with Anxiety When Life is Uncertain. Before I dive into this topic of anxiety, I want to be clear that I'm not talking about diagnosed anxiety disorders. Additionally, this is not an argument for or against medication or counseling. I know we have some in the camp that would say Jesus is all that you need. And then we have others that would say Jesus provides medical professionals to help you with your mental struggles. I'm not advocating for one or the other. I am not, nor will I ever be, an expert on the subject of anxiety. I am simply someone who has dealt with and periodically still deals with it. This is why I'm choosing to share a snippet of my story in hopes that I will encourage someone else. Now, in saying that, I do want to say another question that I've heard is that how do you know when you need to seek some medical assistance or some help or not? Now, I heard it beautifully explained while facilitating a panel discussion at a conference. The therapist on the panel was asked that very question, and in response, she said, "Remember when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane? In Matthew 26 and 38, Christ said, 'My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death.'" Now, although Christ was deeply concerned and overwhelmed with the path that he would have to take, he was able to get out of the garden. The counselor went on to say, you know you need to seek some help when you can't get out of the garden on your own. Now, if that is you, if you find yourself in a situation or a circumstance, please seek some type of assistance. And I will provide some links for you in the description section of this video. Now, several months ago, I found myself waking up in the middle of the night, every night. I tried counting sheep. I tried reading my Bible. I tried saying my prayers. And after I had did all of those things, there I was, still awake, wide awake, I might add, staring up at the ceiling. It took me a while to realize that what I was dealing with was anxiety. I went to bed anxious and I woke up anxious. And it wasn't a noticeable anxiety. In fact, if we had met during that time, you would have assumed everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine in my mind. Mentally, I was agonizing over the circumstances that I could not control in the world and in the lives of those that I love the most. Over and over again, I thought about the possibilities that could go wrong in the world and in my family, and then I rehearsed the negative outcomes over and over. I did this consciously, and I realized now I was doing it subconsciously, which is why I am convinced that I couldn't sleep because I was dealing with anxiety. Maybe you can relate. Maybe you have circumstances in your life that cause your heart to skip a beat. Situations that concern our kids, our parents, our spouses, our employment, and the situations in the world. I know for many of us, life got turned upside down in March of last year, and it has yet to resume any type of normalcy that we were once familiar with. This is why I wrote my most recent article, Dealing with Anxiety When Life is Uncertain. Now, Paul, he gave us a command not to be anxious, but how are we supposed to do it? Whereas I cannot give you a playbook on dealing with anxiety, I can tell you what I have tried to do to combat my own anxiety. The first thing that I've had to do is to ask myself, why am I anxious in the first place? Now, my answer centers around the word control. As long as I have felt like I've had some semblance of control in situations and circumstances, I've been perfectly fine. But the moment that I found myself in a situation beyond my reach, like a global pandemic, a loved one's cancer diagnosis, or a challenging relationship, I felt anxious. The reality that I could not control my circumstances forced me to have to lean and depend on God like I should have been doing in the first place. This caused me to see that there were some areas in my life that I was reluctant to trust God with, erroneously believing that I knew more than God did and that I could solve the situation much better than He could. Ouch and amen. I'm sure none of you ever think like this because you are clearly more Christ-like than I am, but I have. And I realized that if I was going to not be anxious for anything, I had to make a conscious decision to trust God no matter what and remind myself that I am choosing to trust God. This is something that I have to continue to do as I surrender my control for His. When my mind is bombarded with what ifs, God, I trust you. When things look bleak as they will, God, I trust you. When I don't get my way, God, I trust you. When I'm scared, God, I trust you. When I am nervous, God, I trust you. With fill in the blank as often as I need to. God, I trust you. I also had to make some modifications in my prayer life. Prayers are not just petitions. Paul encouraged us to pray, petition, and thank God. This required me to honestly ask for what I desired while simultaneously trusting that God ultimately knows best. Paul could pray with thanksgiving because he learned how to surrender his will for God's perfect will over his desires. I am not there, y'all, but I am committed to working on it, believing that God, who is omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent, is capable of handling all the things that I am anxious about. By choosing to believe this, I can also choose not to be anxious, and so can you.